Chosen one, if you're watching this right now, I need you to understand something crucial. Your being here isn't accidental. Something beyond your control guided you to this moment, and there's a reason for it. While you might think you clicked on this video out of curiosity or because it appeared in your feed, I'm telling you that there's a deeper purpose at work. You've been brought here because there's something you need to know about a situation in your life, specifically about someone who's been in your orbit. Here's what I'm sensing: there's a person in your life right now who isn't what they seem. I'm not talking about someone who's obviously problematic or toxic. Those people are easy to spot. I'm talking about someone who appears helpful, supportive, maybe even spiritual. Someone who says the right things. Someone who seems to care. But underneath that surface, there's something else going on. And you've probably felt it, that subtle discomfort you can't quite explain, that uneasiness that shows up after you interact with them, even though logically everything seems fine. But the message coming through isn't about making you paranoid or suspicious of everyone around you. It's about awakening something inside you that might have gone dormant: your inner knowing, your gut instinct, your spiritual radar. Because here's the truth: not everyone who enters your life has good intentions, and not everyone who stays close to you is meant to go where you're going. Some people show up to observe you, to study your moves, to understand your weaknesses, and they're not doing this to help you grow. They're doing it for their own reasons. Think about it like this. Imagine you're building something important. Maybe it's a business. Maybe it's healing from your past. Maybe it's stepping into a new version of yourself. You're focused, you're committed, you're making progress. Then someone appears. They're interested in what you're doing. They ask questions. They offer encouragement. They seem genuinely invested in your success. But pay attention to what happens over time. Do you feel energized after talking to them, or drained? Do you feel more confident in your path? Or do you start second-guessing yourself? Do they celebrate your wins without comparison? Or is there always a subtle undercurrent of competition? These are the questions most people never ask because we're taught to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to not judge. And those are good values in general. But there's a difference between being judgmental and being discerning. Being judgmental means assuming the worst about people without evidence. Being discerning means paying attention to patterns, trusting your intuition, and recognizing when something doesn't add up. Let me be clear about something: when you receive a warning, whether it comes as an intuitive feeling, a message like this one, or a realization that suddenly clicks into place, it's not because you're being punished or because something terrible is destined to happen. It's the opposite. It's because you're being protected. It's because there's something valuable in you that's worth protecting. Think about it. Nobody puts a security system on an empty house. Protection shows up where there's something precious. You're at a critical point right now. I don't know exactly what stage of life you're in, but I know this: you're in transition. Maybe you're between one chapter and the next. Maybe you're on the verge of a breakthrough. Maybe you're healing from something old and stepping into something new. These in-between moments are powerful, but they're also vulnerable. It's like when a butterfly is emerging from its cocoon. That's when it's most defenseless. And that's often when predators circle. I'm using strong language intentionally because I want you to understand the seriousness of what I'm saying. There are people who wait for these vulnerable moments, not necessarily because they're evil, though some might be. Sometimes it's unconscious. Sometimes it's insecurity driving them. Sometimes they see your light getting brighter and something in them can't handle it. Maybe they've been stuck in the same place for years, and watching you evolve reminds them of their own stagnation. So they do things, small things, subtle things, to keep you where you are. They might say things like, "Don't you think you're moving too fast?" Or, "Remember where you came from?" Or, "Not everyone is meant to change that much." These sound like wisdom, like someone looking out for you. But listen to the effect these words have. Do they inspire you to be cautious and thoughtful, or do they make you feel like you should shrink back and play small? That's how you know the difference. Here's another pattern to watch for. Someone who's always available when you're struggling but becomes distant when you're succeeding. Think about that. A true friend, a genuine supporter, shows up for all of it, the valleys and the mountains. But someone who has a hidden agenda. They're drawn to your weakness because that's when you need them most, and that gives them power. When you're strong and thriving, you don't need them the same way, and they can't handle that shift in dynamic. Or consider this scenario. You share a dream with someone, something you're genuinely excited about. A real ally will either support it or give you honest feedback to help you refine it. But someone who's not truly for you, they'll plant seeds of doubt. They'll bring up every reason it might not work. They'll mention someone else who tried and failed. They'll suggest you wait a little longer, learn a little more, prepare a little better. And all of this sounds reasonable. But what's the cumulative effect? You end up doing nothing. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: spiritual camouflage. There are people who've learned to speak the language of growth, spirituality, and faith without actually embodying any of it. They can quote the right things. They can show up at the right places. They can participate in the right conversations. But if you observe closely over months, not days, if you watch what they actually do when they think nobody's paying attention, you'll see the disconnect. Someone can talk about supporting others while secretly competing with everyone. Someone can speak about abundance while operating from a scarcity mindset that makes them threatened by other people's success. Someone can claim to be on a spiritual path while treating people around them with manipulation and control. The words and the actions don't match, and this is where your discernment becomes essential. Your intuition is constantly giving you information, but most of us have been trained to ignore it. We override that subtle feeling of something's off with logical explanations. We tell ourselves we're being too sensitive, too judgmental, too suspicious. We gaslight ourselves out of our own inner knowing. But that feeling, that discomfort that shows up in your body when you're around certain people, that's not random. That's data. Maybe you notice your shoulders tense up. Maybe you feel exhausted for no clear reason. Maybe you start doubting yourself more. Maybe you feel confused after conversations that seemed perfectly normal on the surface. These are all signs that something is affecting you energetically, even if you can't point to anything specific that was said or done. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Receiving this kind of warning or insight doesn't mean you need to cut everyone off and isolate yourself. It's not about building walls or living in fear. It's about having healthy boundaries and being selective about who gets access to your inner world. There's a difference between being open and being unguarded. You can still be kind, generous, and loving while also being wise about who you let close. Think of it this way: you are the guardian of your own energy, your own peace, your own future. Nobody else is going to protect those things for you. People will take as much as you allow them to take. They'll stay as long as you let them stay. They'll influence you as much as you give them permission to influence you. And most of the time, they're not even doing it consciously. They're just operating from their own wounds, their own fears, their own unhealed places. But you have a responsibility to yourself. You have a responsibility to the person you're becoming. You have a responsibility to the life you're trying to create. And sometimes that responsibility requires difficult choices. It might mean creating distance with someone you care about. It might mean having an uncomfortable conversation. It might mean simply trusting yourself enough to say, something doesn't feel right here, and I'm going to honor that feeling even if I can't fully explain it. This is the beginning of a deeper conversation we're going to have. What I've shared so far is just the foundation, the awareness that you need this information right now. In the next part, we're going to get specific about the actual signs to watch for, the red flags that are easy to miss, and the practical steps you can take to protect yourself while still remaining open to genuine connections. Now that we've established why you're receiving this message and why it matters, let's get into the specifics. Because awareness without action doesn't create change. You need to know exactly what to look for, and more importantly, you need to understand why these patterns show up the way they do. This isn't about memorizing a checklist, it's about developing a sensitivity to what's really happening beneath the surface of your relationships. First thing you need to understand: genuine people and manipulative people often use the same words. They might both say, "I support you," or "I'm here for you," or "I want what's best for you." The difference isn't in the vocabulary, it's in the consistency between what they say and what they actually do over time. Anyone can perform kindness for a day, a week, even a month, but true character reveals itself through sustained behavior, especially when there's nothing to gain from being kind. Let me give you a real example of what I'm talking about. Imagine you tell two different friends about an opportunity you're excited about. Maybe it's a new job, a creative project, or a relationship. The first friend immediately starts asking questions that feel more like interrogation than curiosity. Are you sure you're ready for that? What if it doesn't work out? Have you thought about all the ways this could go wrong? They frame it as concern, but notice the energy. It's deflating. It makes you feel smaller, more uncertain. The second friend has a different response. They might ask thoughtful questions too, but the energy behind it is different. What drew you to this? What excites you most about it? What support do you need to make this happen? Same situation, two completely different approaches. One contracts your energy, the other expands it. But one makes you doubt yourself, the other helps you think more clearly about your actual path forward. Here's something subtle that most people miss. Pay attention to who celebrates your potential versus who only acknowledges your current reality. Someone who's genuinely aligned with your growth will see and speak to where you're headed, not just where you are. They'll recognize something in you that maybe you're just beginning to recognize in yourself. But someone who needs you to stay the same. They'll constantly remind you of your past, your limitations, your previous failures. They'll keep you tethered to old versions of yourself because your evolution threatens the dynamic they're comfortable with. Another pattern to watch: notice who asks about your life versus who tells you about your life. There are people who will spend time with you and somehow, within 15 minutes, they've diagnosed your problems, told you what you should do, and positioned themselves as the one who has it all figured out while you're still struggling. They don't actually listen, they're just waiting for enough information to jump in with their assessment. Real support sounds different. It sounds like curiosity, like genuine questions, like "help me understand what you're experiencing," rather than "here's what your problem is." Let's talk about something that confuses a lot of people: the difference between someone challenging you and someone undermining you. Growth-oriented people will challenge you. They'll push back on your excuses. They'll hold you accountable. They'll point out when you're not showing up as your best self. But here's the key: it strengthens you. Even if it's uncomfortable in the moment, you walk away feeling more capable, more clear, more committed. Undermining is different. It weakens you. It makes you question your judgment, your worth, your capabilities. And the tricky part is that undermining can be disguised as help or honesty. For instance, someone might say, "I'm just being real with you," and then proceed to list all your flaws and failures. That's not being real, that's being destructive. Someone who's actually helping you grow will address specific behaviors or choices without attacking your core identity. They'll say things like, "I noticed you've been canceling on yourself lately, what's going on?" rather than, "You're just not disciplined enough." Here's a scenario that happens all the time. You start making positive changes in your life. Maybe you're eating better, working out, being more intentional with your time, and someone close to you starts making jokes about it. "Oh, look at you being all healthy now. or "You're becoming one of those people." It's packaged as humor, but there's an edge to it. They're uncomfortable with your changes because it highlights their own lack of change. A secure person celebrates growth in others. An insecure person mocks it. Pay attention to people who constantly need you to validate their choices. They can't just make a decision. They need you to agree that it's the right decision. And if you don't, they get defensive or distant. This might seem like they value your opinion, but what's really happening is they're trying to recruit you into their narrative. They need you to co-sign their life because they're uncertain about it themselves. And your growth or different choices feel like judgment to them, even when you haven't said a word. Let me tell you about energy vampires, and I don't mean this in some mystical, abstract way. I mean people who consistently leave you feeling depleted. Every interaction is heavy. They always have a crisis. They always need something. And you care about them, so you show up. But notice what happens. Do they ever ask about you? Do they notice when you're struggling? Do they have the capacity to give, or are they only capable of taking? Healthy relationships have a flow. Sometimes you give more, sometimes they give more, but over time there's reciprocity. With energy vampires, it's always one-directional. Here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the obvious ones. They're not dramatic or volatile. They're subtle. They're the ones who slowly, almost imperceptibly, isolate you from other people. They might make small comments about your other friends. I don't know. They just seem kind of fake, or do you really think they have your best interests at heart? Over time, you start seeing your other relationships through their lens. Before you know it, they've become your primary relationship, and everyone else has faded into the background. That's not love, that's control. Watch for people who tell you they're different from everyone else in your life. Nobody understands you like I do, or everyone else has let you down, but I won't. This is a red flag disguised as devotion. What they're really doing is positioning themselves as your only source of understanding and support, which gives them tremendous power over you. Healthy people encourage you to have multiple strong relationships. They want you to have a support system, not just them. Let's address something about timing, because this is crucial. Sometimes people show up in your life at precisely the moment when you're vulnerable. After a breakup, after a loss, during a career transition, when you're questioning everything. And they seem like an answer to a prayer. They're attentive, understanding, present. But here's the question you need to ask: are they showing up for who you actually are, or are they showing up for the vulnerable state you're in? Because if they're attracted to your weakness rather than your strength, what happens when you heal? What happens when you no longer need them the way you did? I've seen this pattern repeatedly. Someone enters during your difficult season, becomes essential to your survival of that season, and then becomes threatened when you start thriving. Because the relationship was built on a foundation of your need, not mutual respect and genuine connection. When you no longer need them in that same way, the relationship doesn't evolve, it deteriorates. They might even consciously or unconsciously try to keep you in that needy state, because that's where they have value in your life. Another thing to notice: how do people respond when you set boundaries? When you say no, when you're not available, when you need space, when you make a choice that doesn't include them, do they respect it? Or do they push back? Do they make you feel guilty? Do they question your judgment? Do they tell you you're changing, or you're not the person they thought you were? Someone who respects you will respect your boundaries, even if they're disappointed. Someone who's trying to control you will make your boundaries about them. Here's a practical example. You tell someone you need a few days to yourself to recharge and process some things. A healthy response sounds like, "Of course, take the time you need. I'm here when you're ready." An unhealthy response sounds like, "Why do you need space from me? Did I do something wrong? I thought we were close." This feels like you're pulling away. See the difference? One respects your need. The other makes your need about their insecurity and pressures you to take care of their feelings instead of honoring your own needs. Let's talk about people who only show up for certain parts of your life. They're around when things are fun, when you're going out, but when there's something entertaining happening. But when you're dealing with real life, when you're stressed, when you're working on something difficult, when you're not particularly fun to be around, they disappear. These are fair weather friends. They want access to the highlight reel, but they're not interested in the behind, the scenes reality of your actual life.